Hello everyone, Fred here, doing my week 3 Biggest Loser Challenge video. This week Steve wanted us to talk about our fat stories. So after thinking long and hard, I don't really particularly have 3 fat stories I could share this week. Over the years, I've had things that have happened. Being as big as I was, I know things happened. I either turned my eye when they started to happen, I walked away, didn't want to confront the people, or it was just an inconvenience because of just reality. For example, buses. I always had a problem fitting in bus seats. For example, my wife's works, they run a bus to go to their Christmas party every year. And it was always a tight fit for me. I always had to sit by myself. It was an inconvenience, and a little embarrassing, but you know, it was tolerable. It wasn't a big deal. It was just, that's a reality. But I think the only time that I was ever really discriminated against because of my weight was just traveling in the air. Airlines, in particular, were always a problem. Always stressful. I always had to try to sit myself somewhere where I knew I wasn't going to be an issue. I didn't want to bring attention to myself, so to speak. Typically, I always try to sit in the last seat against a window. I don't like sitting in the aisle seats because I always had to put my leg out in the aisle. I'm 6'1", almost 6'2", and I tried to get as much room as I could. I tended to find that the back seat was always a little bit bigger. For some reason, it had a little bit more room, and usually nobody sat in the back seat, so I always tried to get back there, and I could just lean up against the window, and I was okay. But then there was a point in time where I tried to sit in the bulkhead seats because I knew there was more leg room. So I probably a couple flights over time I was using the bulkhead seats, never had any problems. And then one time I had an issue. I got to my seat, and a colleague was sitting beside me who always sat in bulk seats too. He was a tall guy but very thin. So I sat with him, and I got on the plane, and this was when I usually tried to ask the flight attendants for the belt extenders, because I always needed one. I knew I needed one. So I asked the flight attendant for a belt extender, and she gave me a funny, disgusted look. You know, you get that look, you know it. I thought, oh man, here we go. I never really had a problem if I asked up front, because they usually had them up front. They usually had them in that first, the very first overhead bin. I usually knew where they were. So she said, okay, I'll bring them back to you. And I went and sat down, and as she was walking back, she started getting that look, and I knew it. And she said, well, actually, she didn't say anything to me. She came up, looked at me, and she had the belt extender in her hand, and then she walked away. She went back to the pilot. I saw her go back up to the front of the plane. And it was about, maybe 10 minutes later. It was getting pretty late, and I knew they were getting ready to pull back. And she came back and said, sir, I talked to the pilot, and he doesn't want you to sit in the bulkhead. He's worried you won't be able to help people out in case of an emergency. And I could not believe she did that. And it was in front. It was not quiet. She didn't do it discreetly. She said it very loud. And she said, sir, I'm going to have to put you in the back of the plane. So my partner couldn't believe it. And I just shook my head and I said, I'll see you when we get off the plane. And she put me in the back of the plane and never talked to me again the whole flight. I couldn't believe she did that. So I think that was about the only time I really had a real issue being heavy. But I really like those bulkhead seats because I never really had a big butt. I have a big butt, but it's not big enough to worry about the left and right width. It was just always my knees that always just... I mean, there was a time I flew from... Okay, I'm getting off subject here, but I had to be from Atlanta. That was my San Francisco flight. The flight from Atlanta to San Francisco, 5-hour flight or whatever it was, and by the time I got off the flight, I could barely walk. My knees were so I almost had, I think I had fluid on my knees for like a week. I had pain in my knees because I was so cramped in the seat. And honestly, it was a nightmare. But that's what caused me to get my own. Yep, I have my own belt extender. Here it is. We all know them. So, this is kind of a relic now. Because I know I won't need it. I think the last time I flew, I weighed probably about 350. And I almost didn't need it. I had like a half inch to go and I would have been fine. I probably could have gotten in without one, but I wore it anyway. So I know now that I'm down another 20 pounds or so from that. By the time I fly next time, it's going to be a relic. I'll probably donate to somebody. I don't know, maybe I'll keep it. But yeah, I acquired my own belt. Mm-hmm. Anyway, hope everybody has a good week. I've used up 6 minutes. That's enough. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.